Yeah, this, not to bring up Chaperone as an example again, but I remember like she was performing in red states, and people were like, if she's so that, like, why would she be performing in a red state? She's from the Midwest, first of all. Are you stupid? Second, do people genuinely think, like, do y'all think there's no queer people in red states? Do you think, like, once you cross the border into a red state, you become straight immediately? That's what happens. I live in Texas. There are 30 million people here. Let's say, like, what? Like, even if we said 20 million of those people are adults, if you're less than 10 million, you are not the majority. Like, people live here too. And I think this is also why people feel so comfortable like investigating into people's sexualities, because they don't consider the part that you might literally endanger somebody. They're like, yeah, la la la, everyone likes gay people and it's totally fine. No, actually, that's just not like factually true. Unfortunately, like people who are violently homophobic still exist. That still exists. And those people are sometimes people's family members. There's sometimes people in your close environment that other people cannot leave. People can't just up and move. That's another thing about the red states too. People be like, they just pretend like these things don't happen. I don't know. Or like to abandon people collectively because they're queer in a red state is so odd to me. And then also someone on this video was like, I feel like this is an odd framing of this topic because I've only seen non-lesbians say that Chaperone couldn't be a lesbian because she's dated Ben in the past. And I was talking about, I'm having a different conversation. I was talking about people trying to disregard her queer journey to gold star her in some way. Yeah, and this person was like, you framed this like oddly. And I was like, no, I didn't. We're having two different conversations. You can call out queer people for doing stuff that's weird too. We are talking about things of a similar vein, but we're not talking about the same thing. I'm talking about people disregarding her queer journey because she's a lesbian. You're talking about people disregarding that she's a lesbian because of her queer journey. Not this comment. It was a different comment. But I'm just saying that like we weren't having the same conversation. And they were like, why did you word it? Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, we can actually talk about multiple things. Multiple conversations can exist in the same room, I fear.
These influencers that are telling you they're not making crazy amounts of money are lying to you.
This doesn't apply if you're Black. They don't pay us nothing. And I mean that so sincerely. I have over 480,000 followers, and I still have to work a full-time job and a part-time job. Actually, this doesn't apply to most people of color under the sun. It also doesn't apply to disabled creators. It doesn't apply to many plus size creators. It doesn't apply to many like presentingly queer creators. It don't. Now, obviously, there is money out there to be made. I won't hold you. And there are some very clear exceptions to this generalized rule. But in general, unless you look like her and make super palatable content, don't. We're not all out here buying cars and houses and etc., y'all. I promise. You have to be handheld through every piece of content you consume online, and there's a good chance your digital literacy skills are awful. I'm not talking about asking creators questions when you have valid questions, especially trying to understand things like cultural appropriation or something. I mean, if you cannot apply logical context to a situation, or if you cannot apply like nuance into something very general and very broad given to you within 60 seconds to about a minute and a half, then you need to work on your digital literacy skills. And some of this involves going over like your basic like English literacy skills, like applying context to a situation or understanding the rhetorical triangle. When a creator talks about an experience that they're going through or that maybe the general collective is going through and you go, okay, but that doesn't happen to me. Right, different speaker in a different context. So what's the point of commenting that? Some of it's the fact that y'all need to just practice taking initiative when it comes to your own understanding of topics. Like if a recipe that you see calls for grapes and you know you're allergic to grapes, you take the initiative to look up a substitute, not the creator. You do that. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a creator explain the basics of an idea from a social political topic down to a simple recipe and the comments be like, okay, but what about this? What about this? What about this? Babe, apply some logic on your own. Aside from just being annoying, y'all are losing those literacy skills. And as we are moving into a heavily propagandized and AI era, you're going to need them. If you do not think you need to stop vaping for your own health, that's fine. I know I cannot persuade you. Because you know what, to an extent, you're right. The air is polluted, the water is filled with lead and dirt and who knows what else. The food has questionable things in it that can make us all sick and it's definitely not good for us. Okay, I can tell you that sucking on nicotine or the devil's lettuce or whatever else is in that blue raspberry packet of air that y'all like to breathe in day and day out is bad for you, but it's not gonna click. So if you won't do it for yourself, fine. I mean, it sucks to watch Big Tobacco win after years and years and years of anti-tobacco work just so that they could put it in a fun little USB port and suck y'all right up, but okay. But if you won't do it for you, do it for Congo. Do it for the over 40,000 children as young as 4 years old working their days away in labor camps, making sure that you can have the resources to build that vape. Do it for the over 5 million people who have had their lives stolen for them in the wake of endless violence over these resources. Do it for the 48 women who are SA'd every single hour, as Congo is now the capital of the world. If you can't find it in your heart to love yourself and your lungs enough to put down a glorified flash drive, okay, do it for the rest of the world. Especially if you're one of those people who has BLM in their bio, you need to pack it up expeditiously. The government intentionally defunds and devalues education to keep people voting against their best interest. When we talk about people in the South, they're often painted as like stupid, and for starters, they're just not. They are oftentimes incredibly creative, inventive, brilliant people, but especially in some rural communities, they are significantly less educated. And that's not on accident. If you keep people ignorant, and I don't mean dumb or stupid, I mean literally ill-informed and unknowledgeable, it makes them easier to manipulate. It's why enslaved people couldn't read. And while this definitely still plays out in communities of color, specifically Black communities today, because you can't erase that kind of legacy, especially when you're continuing to do the same stuff, it also plays a role in a lot of rural communities. If people remain ignorant, it makes it really easy to control their fear. You pick a scapegoat, whether it's a marginalized community all the way up to scientists who are just trying to do their best. You say everything is their fault. You deny all access to education about that group, all information possible, and you say, oh, but I can fix it. I can take care of you. And it works over and over and over again. And that's what the government has done before, and it's what they're doing now, devaluing and defunding education. They will lock up the scientists, which is happening, by the way. They will yank things out of the curriculum. They will say that everything is a ploy and it's all fake news, and they will prey on people's fears. It's also why they let the Affordable Connectivity Program run out, because people were learning too much. When we talk about people in the South and voting in the South, it's not just a bunch of country bumpkins filled with hate running amok. I mean, maybe a few, but not everybody. It's an intentional and deliberate move by the government to keep them in power. Y'all need to start approaching conversations about the South with way more nuance than you do, or you need to stay out of it. The best part of having someone, especially a man, blatantly disrespect any boundaries that a person sets online, even very simple, straightforward ones, is that it tells everyone exactly who they are in real life. Because if I say, don't call me sis, don't call me sister, don't call me girl, it is condescending, it is disrespectful, and regardless of all of that, I just don't like it. That should be the end. I said, don't call me that, and that should be the beginning and end of that conversation. And yet it never is. There are always people in my comment section, usually guys, but definitely not always, who are like, look, sis, girl, queen, babe, whatever, you need to calm down. It's just a word. And it lets me know that y'all have no respect or care for the simple boundaries around you. Which begs the question, what other boundaries are you willing to disrespect? How far are you willing to push people when you feel like you're not getting your way? Because if your first reaction to an internet stranger setting a boundary with you, a person you do not know and will likely not cross paths with again, is to push that boundary, to make them uncomfortable, to disrespect them in that way, it tells everybody the way that you treat the people in your real life. And if this isn't a common occurrence in your life, maybe it's because the people in your life don't feel comfortable telling you no, because they know exactly how you're going to react. But I don't have that problem, because I know where the block button is. And I also know how to share these comments with other people so they can also see exactly who you are. And by the way, just because I say something happens in one place, like gerrymandering happens in the South, it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen in other places. It just means I'm talking about the South. It's called context. So while y'all might be taking your consent courses or maybe your anger management courses, you might want to sprinkle a little English 101 in there because you need it. Some of y'all are addicted to grass. MJ, the devil's lettuce, getting elevated. I don't care what you want to call it. Some of y'all have a problem. And before y'all get in my comment, shut up. It doesn't work like that. You don't know what you're talking about. I want y'all to know I understand the chemical science as to why it's not addictive, like let's say alcohol, but y'all are addicted like gambling. Like recently, Megan Thee Stallion said that she would stop her concert if people didn't stop getting elevated in that enclosed space that she was in, and even threatened to call the police on somebody who was doing it that she could see in one of the rows. And people were all upset, saying that she's weird, blah, 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 as if A, it's not illegal to do that in an enclosed space, and B, as if she hasn't already said on multiple occasions, including in one of her songs, that she doesn't like it. Like, if you can't not do it for the length of a concert, maybe you have a problem. And it's not just here, it's everywhere. I see on a bunch of like pregnant lady mommy forums about people who are like, oh yeah, no, I know I'm pregnant, but I still do it every single day. Huh? I know the research doesn't say that you shouldn't. The research doesn't say that you should. We don't have enough research yet, but they're recommending that you don't do that. So why would you take that gamble? But people do all the time. They just can't put it down. I mean, for some people, it's the first thing they do when their feet hit the floor in the morning. They do it again before they get in the car and drive to work. They do it again as soon as they get home from work, do a few more activities, and do it again before bed. Your whole day is bookended by getting up there. Like, do you have your fun? But if it's coming at the cost of the well-being of other people, including yourself in a day, maybe it's not as non-addictive as we like to say. And that's all right. Just, we should have a conversation about it so people can get the help that they might need. We will never know the true number of lives lost in Palestine, and that is horrifying. Right now, numbers reported by the authorities given to the UN sit somewhere between that 35,000 to 38,000-ish mark. However, that number doesn't include people that have starved and we didn't know about it. It doesn't include people who have gotten sick and passed away from their illness. It doesn't include people trapped beneath the rubble, people that we cannot find, people whose bodies, and this might be graphic, have already decomposed. However, even beyond that, we will never know a true number because a lot of these numbers have to come from the Ministry of Health. And right now, the health system in Palestine has collapsed. Every single time the IDF attacked a hospital, massacred doctors and patients, unloaded just hellfire from the skies on care centers. This is why. The 10th step of a genocide is denial. And it's really easy to deny that something happened or to say that it wasn't as bad as it looks if you can't get accurate numbers and accurate data. And they know that. So while it was devastating to watch these war crimes take place over and over and over again, and we were all shocked with just how cruel people could be, remember that it wasn't just for funsies, it was on purpose. Every single thing we've seen and every single step that they have taken has been on purpose. And that's why it's so important to help everyone that we can, the best we can at this point. Document everything. Take screenshots. Print things out. Write them down in a journal. Use the little filters when they come across your page. Watch the video all the way through. Donate when you can. Do what you can. Because in the future, we will never know just how bad this really was. But we can make sure that they cannot deny anything else. If you had asked me 24 hours ago what I thought my day would consist of, watching people defend driving while elevated would not have clocked my list. Especially when the justification is that the roads are just filled with people being unsafe and that it's nothing like driving under the influence of alcohol. What are we doing? I mean, that's like going robbing banks is better than committing arson, which is better than going on like a first-degree unalivement spree. Yeah, babes, I guess so. But guess what? All three are bad. I'd rather be next to somebody texting than an intoxicated driver. I'd rather be next to somebody elevated, I guess, than somebody texting. But guess what? In a perfect world, none of you would be on the road. Like, I don't care if you're so delusional that you think it makes you a better driver. If your driving was that bad, please get off the road. If it makes your anxiety better and now you feel confident getting behind the wheel of a car, please do not get behind the wheel of a car. And I say that as somebody who was so anxious about driving, I didn't drive until I was 22. I mean, what y'all decide to do with y'all's lives is y'all's business, but you keep making choices that could negatively impact other people. And honestly, I don't want to be impacted by y'all because you thought that you got it. I don't need to know if you got it. Just don't do it. The world needs to be safe and accessible for you. Period. Full stop. But it does not need to bend to your will, especially if that will comes at the safety and well-being of other people. I've been having a lot of talks lately, mostly with palm-colored people, where they use their marginalization or their struggle to justify some harmful action to someone else. For example, grass should be legalized for a bunch of reasons, but one of which is that when used medicinally, it can help with a ton of things like ADHD, autism, chronic pain, etc. You should be able to do that because it makes the world accessible to you. Period. It does not mean you get to do it any place, anytime, willy-nilly, because that impacts other people, like me, who gets really sick from the smell. Or get behind the wheel of a car, which impacts people like me, who are also on the road. Or recently someone commented that we shouldn't share the images coming out of because they're autistic and they found it triggering. But the thing is, that's why we need content warnings. That's why we need to give people the heads up. That's why we have the mute button. But it doesn't mean silencing an entire population of people to accommodate you. And this isn't only about disability, it's everywhere. Like when Zios use their religion to justify harming or silencing or belittling other people. Like when they say, oh, well, that person has on a kufiya and so I feel unsafe. You deserve to feel safe, which means you should have a way to disengage safely, walk away, maybe find some therapy to help work through those issues, as therapy should be accessible. But it doesn't mean that that person needs to change. It doesn't. And as I have this talk with palm-colored people more than anybody else, I think it has something to do with entitlement more than anything. But as a general PSA, the world needs to be accessible for you. Period. It does not need to be accessible to you to the exclusion of anyone else. Stop talking about pregnancy and babies and fetuses this way, because it is dehumanizing and it absolutely bleeds on over into the way that y'all talk about children when they are outside of the womb. I am 8 months pregnant and I am still incredibly pro-choice. You need to be able to make the best decision for yourself, your health, your body, your future, and nobody else honestly should be able to have a say in that. But the minute you decide to go through with that pregnancy and to have that child, it is not just about you anymore. You have an obligation to take care of that fetus. And if you can't see that, and I say this with love in my body, then you are genuinely not ready to be a parent. Because to be a parent means prioritizing their safety and their well-being. And yes, this includes in pregnancy, because the choices you make while pregnant can and will impact them for the rest of their lives. That fetus is not a renter borrowing your womb, being an inconvenience. That is a responsibility that you are taking on, that you are obligated to take care of. And I get it. Morning sickness sucks. I lost 15 pounds my first trimester. Giving up the things that bring you pleasure sucks. Not being able to eat what you want or go where you want or do what you want blows. But you take on that responsibility when you choose to be a parent. And this rhetoric around fetuses and pregnancies and babies, when people say like, oh, my condolences when you tell them that you're pregnant, or calling them what is using your womb, bleeds into the way that we treat them when they're children. It is why people feel so comfortable calling them like crotch goblins or F trophies. Those are people, human beings, and you dehumanize them from conception. And again, I'm pro-choice, and I hate when y'all put me in a position where it might sound like I'm not. Because I believe you should choose what is best for you and your future, up to the point where you are making a conscious decision where you could be harming someone or something else. And if you do not get that, then love and light, do not have children. And beyond all of that, talk about these future people with some decency. So I just learned what a canna mom is, or a canna parent, and I just have to say, we need to release everybody who is locked up on a grass-related charge and reunite every single family that has been separated. Every single one. If you didn't know, a canna parent is a person who gets elevated periodically throughout the day to help them cope with life struggles, namely that of having kids. And no, I'm not talking about using grass for medicinal purposes like chronic pain. I'm talking about it like a wine mom, but not. And there's a lot we could get into. There's a lot that could be impacted. I don't want to get into it. What I will say, though, is that we need to start rectifying the millions of lives that have been torn up before this kind of stuff became acceptable. Because for decades, even now, anybody darker than a brown paper bag has had some really tough consequences for this kind of behavior, if you know what I mean. And I'm talking brutal arrest, harsh prison sentences, having your kids taken from you and not being able to get them back, and being unable to get a job, a whole host of consequences. But recently, mostly after palm-colored people started doing it and profiting off of it, it became okay to do anytime, any place, even if you're pregnant and even if you're parenting. And you can feel how you feel on that. I feel how I feel on that. But more than anything, we need to start focusing on repairing some of the damage that has been done. Because this big cultural shift is literally a slap in the face to all of the people who have had their lives permanently changed for the worse because of it. Is knowing that your baby's growing enough to balance out the negative sides of pregnancy. For me, yes, but I'm biased. First, I've always wanted to be a mom. This is it. This is my thing. This is my Everest if I was a mountain climber. Like, this is my wildest dream. And I've always known I was willing to put up with a lot because parenthood was like my dream. And if that's not your dream, that is so fine. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to be an amazing parent, because you are if you want to be. I'm just saying, going in, that was a part of my mental. But second, I have been really blessed with so far having a pretty easy pregnancy and a physical component. Now, emotionally, it has been pretty rough. I've gone through a breakup. I've moved. I had some online bullying stuff. So it was not easy. And I do think that's a part of some of the negative sides. But if you're talking physical, I've been pretty blessed to have like a pretty average go of it. That being said, even the most average run-of-the-mill pregnancy is still hard. Yes, there are great days. There are also really bad days. And on those really bad days, you got to find something to hold on to. For me, it's 3 things. The big one is feeling her move. And that doesn't really kick in until the second trimester, which means you got to tough it out for that first trimester. And in my opinion, the first was the worst. My second is the science of it all. I got really into like fetal development because knowing what was happening with her and with my body helped me rationalize some of the feelings that I was having and the experiences I was having. And I'm more than happy to give some examples of that, but I don't want to talk too much. And the third is being able to watch her learn and grow outside of the womb. It's knowing that this time period, these 9 to 10-ish months are temporary, and then I get to spend the rest of my life watching her figure out everything from how to see all the way up to handling relationship conflict. Also, science fair projects. I am so excited to do school with her again. I don't know. My point is, find whatever those things are to keep you grounded and hold on to them real tight, because you're going to need it. Yes, it's worth it big picture, but in those moments when like your head is in the toilet and you're alternating between like falling asleep, crying, and throwing up, even holding on to the smallest thing, baby socks, the smell of diapers, whatever it is, helps. 2 years ago today, on June 24th, 2022, the Supreme Court released its decision in Dobbs versus Jackson and overturned Roe v. Wade. Since then, abortion access has been an issue that impacts every person in the country, but to nobody's surprise, anti-abortion laws still disproportionately impact Black women. According to new studies, about 57% of Black women ages 15 to 49, which is generally considered reproductive age, live in states with abortion bans or threats to abortion access. That is over half of the Black women in the country. And of these nearly 7 million women, almost 2.7 million are economically insecure, which means they can't just get up and go to places that still offer abortion access. And having the autonomy to make medical decisions for yourself should be a human right, but it's not just that. Abortion bans open up the door for a host of other issues, like a decline in quality antenatal care like ultrasounds, and a drop in domestic violence screenings, despite the fact that pregnant people are at a higher risk of being unalived by their partners. These issues are then compounded for Black women who are already 3 times more likely to not survive childbirth due to a pregnancy-related complication compared to their white peers, are more likely to experience intimate partner violence, and already struggle with economic inequality. So when we talk about the impact of the Dobbs decision, it's important that we center Black voices, not because somebody is more important than somebody else, but because we should focus on the most marginalized voices among us. What do y'all want when you comment things like this? What do you have to gain? Every time you find out that I or any woman is pregnant and single, the comments start to look like this, and I just don't understand what there is to be gained. I'm a month out from my due date, so there's nothing I can do, and even if there was, I wouldn't do it. I am over the moon about my daughter. I can't control the choices of other people. I can only make the best of my situation, and I'm thrilled. And every single time people see that, they want to tear me down and tear down that joy. And I just can't imagine being that bitter, wanting people to be that sad. I don't get it. Now, like I said, you're not going to tear me down. I am thrilled with my life choices. I am so happy. But I have had points in this pregnancy where my mental health has been really low, and these comments are unkind and make every situation worse. And in all honesty, they're quite cruel, especially when directed at somebody who might not be so happy with such a great support system. So I don't know what y'all get from this whole judgy, holier than thou thing that you like to do every time you see a stranger happy, but it's really mean, and you guys really should stop. So I've said it before and I'll say it again. Teenagers do the nasty, the devil's tango, whatever you want to call it. Teenagers are having sex, which means that they need to be educated, period. And most people know this. Like 96% of parents support having some type of X education in high schools and 84% in middle schools so that their children can feel safe and supported and educated when making decisions about their bodies. And that's because a good curriculum that covers a bunch of topics from consent to LGBTQ identities to body confidence makes taboo topics less taboo, which leads to less bullying, a greater sense of self, and overall good health. But the thing is, X-Ed actually needs to start younger. And no, I'm not talking about teaching your kindergartner about the birds, the bees, and everything in between, but having conversations about consent, showing a diverse array of relationships, teaching them how to correctly identify their body parts are critical. Because the best way to make taboo conversations less taboo isn't to destigmatize a topic, it's to not put the stigma there in the first place. And that's something that everyone benefits from. At the end of the day, X-Ed just needs to be a part of the curriculum, like the Pythagorean theorem or classic literature. So before you cringe, remember how important X education is, because all people should have the knowledge and the confidence to make smart decisions for their bodies, even children. While DJT is using as a slur on national television and no one is batting an eyelash, 269 members of the House voted to effectively conceal the amount of people martyred in. And of those 269 members of the House, 62 of them are Democrats. So apparently they can agree on something, and that something is concealing the truth of the horrors taking place in. As of this past Thursday, in a move that was led by both Democrats and Republicans alike, the State Department is prohibited from citing statistics from the Ministry of Health in. And keep in mind, the GHM is like the only official source that has been keeping up with the sheer number of people that have been unalived in the face of this endless brutality, with the number sitting around 38,000-ish. That toll is assumed to be much higher, and it's really hard to get accurate stats as people have been lost beneath the rubble, as violent attacks continue to happen, as the medical system has been completely decimated. So we don't have a super accurate number, but right now people are going with the official 38,000-ish. And the House has now voted to keep those numbers from us, to keep us in the dark as best as possible going forward. All the while, a whole population of people is having their very identity used in a horrific and derogatory manner on TV, unchecked. Make no mistake, there is no lesser of two evils. There are two sides, both of them are evil, and both of them will do anything to continue to devalue and dehumanize an entire population of people while keeping us from doing anything about it. We need to be as kind and supportive as possible to the people in our communities and the people in our bubbles, more now than ever before. I know we live in this whole era of I don't owe anybody anything. I don't need to expend emotional labor on my besties. I don't need to pick anybody up from the airport or answer the phone when they call or help somebody move. And we should all be paying for play dates or whatever it is. Dead it, now is not the time. If you didn't know, the Supreme Court has ruled that cities can punish you if you are unhoused sleeping outside. They have criminalized homelessness. And as you well know, being unhoused and living in poverty is a cycle that's really hard to get out of. On the best day, being criminalized makes it 100 times harder, because the shelters are backed all the way up 6 months, 9 months, even a year, because we're in the middle of a housing crisis. It's already incredibly hard to get a job, much less a well-paying one, so that you can afford a place to live if you don't have a permanent address. It is exponentially harder if you have charges against you. If you get arrested and imprisoned, it's very likely that you won't be able to make bail, which means you'll be stuck there, and you can't make bail because you had no money in the first place. Which means that you are now stuck in horrific conditions doing free labor for who knows how long, because remember, slavery is illegal except for in cases of punishment. Remember, most of us are living paycheck to paycheck. We are one emergency or a handful of small weird inconveniences away from being unhoused, almost every single one of us. Clearly, the government doesn't care because they want you in jail so they can use you for that free labor thing. So all we really have at this point is each other. So while that whole nonchalant, I don't owe nobody anything time period was definitely a time period, it's time to pack it up. Because the only way we're going to survive this is if we care for each other.
Did you know that herpes are far more common than most people think? I'm sorry, that was rude. Hey, how you doing, friend? Did you know that over 50% of Americans have oral herpes, and that is 1 in 6 for genital herpes? Did you know that you can have sex one time even within a relationship and still contract an STI? Yes, more unprotected exposure increases your chances of contracting one, but STIs are not bound to promiscuity. Did you know that many STIs are treatable and or curable? And that even if you have one like herpes or HIV that is not completely curable, you can still have an active and healthy sex life. Now, you may be asking, why the fuck is she telling me this? Because society places a stigma on STIs and the people that have them, which often makes people hesitant to seek medical treatment if they suspect that they have one. It also makes it easier to spread misinformation about STIs, and it makes people think that they're immune to contracting one unless they have careless sex. Now, prevention is always the goal, which is why I spend a lot of time talking about protection and vaccines for viruses like HPV. I also encourage everybody to be very enthusiastic about testing. But I truly believe that a large part of STI education is digging past the shame so that we can center education and compassion. This lesbian creator made a video about how she doesn't think there's anything wrong with the term gold star lesbian. The gist is that she's proud of resisting her conditioning by not having an intimate history with men, and that she should be able to express that without being accused of shaming. And I want to share my perspective as a lesbian who's also never been with a man. Personally, I would say that I feel gratefulness rather than pride. Compulsory heterosexuality is a concept that was introduced in the 1980s and is basically used to describe the fact that society enforces heterosexuality. To the point that at some point, a lot of queer people did not even know that they were queer. Religion is a big part of this. Compulsory heterosexuality ends up in different ways depending on our individual circumstances. My mother is Christian, but she is far less judgmental and far more open-minded than a lot of her peers. Before my father passed, I was young, but I recall him having a best friend that was a lesbian, and he was non-religious. I can't imagine growing up in a household where it was actually dangerous to be queer. I got the messaging from outside, but internally, I was never bombarded with the message that I would burn in hell for all eternity for being a lesbian from the people who I was supposed to trust most in the world. I also became aware of my orientation very early. Before I knew what it meant to be a lesbian, I knew that I had no inclination towards boys. When they showed interest in me, it just felt incorrect. And then once I became aware of what sexuality meant, I just craved any information I could find about feminism, lesbianism, and decentering men. This started at like age 12. I share all this to say that had I been dealt different circumstances, I could have ended up being with a man at some point. And I would just hope that every lesbian knows that no woman is less for having current or previous dealings with a man, regardless of how proud you are of your own journey.
Meg Thee Stallion called somebody out for smoking at her concert, and that has started the monthly debate between weed whackers and those who don't like gardening, if you catch my drift. Personally, I am friends with Wana, okay? That bitch ain't never done me wrong. We don't have a codependent relationship. We are copacetic. I don't typically debate with non-smokers because I don't really give a fuck. Oh, y'all are fiends. It's not ladylike, baby. I'm built like a joint. It's meant to be. Fuck all that shit. But there is also a such thing as tree etiquette. For instance, I don't smoke around pregnant people or children. That's just a given. Nor do I do it in rooms where other people are present unless they do it too, or they say that it's explicitly okay. This includes parks, concerts, and other venues. Now, I do like to be lifted at certain events. I was at the Meg Thee Stallion concert, but that's why edibles exist. Smoke can trigger certain conditions. Bitches got asthma. I've left concerts with a headache because of excessive smoke. It ain't that deep. Take an edible. And lastly, breaks are good. Barring medical reasons, if you find that you can't not smoke, then you may have a little dependence, and that's why you can't go anywhere without doing it, friend. A bill has passed that requires Louisiana public schools to display the 10 Commandments in classrooms. I just want to say that this is the reason why I don't feel the need to mince words when I'm criticizing Christianity. As I've said before, it is not just a religion. It is an institution in Western society that everyone is subjected to, giving us all the right to criticize our oppressor. It doesn't just stop at this one bill. Objections to abortion, contraception, sexual education, rights for same-sex couples have all been attempts by conservatives to legislate Christian values. This nation was founded on Christianity. Thanks for admitting that the Constitution is bullshit and that our rights are merely suggestions. Y'all are finally ready to admit that the U.S. is a Christo-fascist nation that spits in the face of democracy. Good for you. It will bring morality back to school. See, that's y'all problem now. I avoid stealing, killing, and cheating because I've developed an actual conscience. The knowledge that something would hurt another person is enough to deter me from doing it. Y'all only find morality in religion, which is why many of you don't mind being disrespectful and bigoted in the name of it. The God outlined by Christianity would not even support this bill. Don't y'all use the free will talking point anytime you have to answer to why God allows evil in the society that he controls? Y'all say that God does not force anybody to worship him. So it seems that he would not support placing any type of mandate behind religion. The same conservatives who backed this bill voted against providing meals for needy families during the summer. They think it's more important to feed children religion than food. If I saw the debate, or at least parts of it, eventually I disassociated. And I feel that Trump only won to people who can be convinced of quite literally anything so long as it's said in a confident tone, which unfortunately is the majority of fucking Americans. Americans. The truth ain't never mattered in politics. That man said that Democrats were trying to legalize after-birth abortions. Please point me to a politician on any side that is trying to legalize infanticide. There is no such thing as an after-birth abortion. How's everyone doing at their black-ass job today? Trump has gotten so used to dehumanizing minorities that even when he's trying to appear civil and level-headed, he still can't resist. That racism is in his core. And believe me, I recognize that Biden did not perform well. Because even though the moderators were just props, had Biden been, alive, he could have easily challenged Trump's talking points. Instead, he just stood there looking like this. That debate did him no favors. All it did was affirm the sentiments that he may not be cognizant enough to have a driver's license, let alone hold public office. And Trump should have never been allowed to run in the first place. He's a corrupt reality star with no political experience and a blonde 27-piece. Can we elect Nene Leakes? The saddest part is that the true losers of this debate are us.
Still a bit baffled by self-sabotaging minorities. Because on one hand, there are those who know that they've aligned themselves with parties that hate them, but they've somehow just made themselves okay with it. For instance, I just watched a video of an Asian Trump supporter who was being confronted with all the racist things that Trump has said about Asian communities. And when pressed about how he can continue to support somebody who is clearly prejudiced against Asian people, he stuttered through some explanation about how deep down Trump isn't actually racist. He just wants the best for this country. Meaning that he is so dedicated to the other parts of Trump's bigoted platform that he has made himself okay with anti-Asian racism. Then you have those who are somehow oblivious to the fact that conservatives hate them until they have an experience that brings that hatred further to the forefront. Like that Hispanic family that went viral for moving their family from California to Idaho because they wanted a place that better suited their conservative politics. Then they were startled when they got to Idaho and realized that the conservatives there were racist and anti-immigration. You align yourselves with conservatives politically, yet you didn't know that one of their primary stances is to be anti-immigration. I think I'll go skydiving tomorrow with nothing but my titties as a parachute and then act surprised when I hit the ground. I've actually been watching a lot of ex-gay content for a book that I'm writing, and one thing that's consistent in nearly all of the testimonies I've heard is that they admit to still being attracted to their same sex. They just don't call it attraction. They use terms like temptation, or I still struggle with temptation. They blame it on the devil, or the devil still pushes me towards lust and unnatural thoughts. All of this religious mumbo jumbo to talk around the fact that being gay is not a choice, and that these people are still attracted to their same sex because they are gay. A gay person who's been convinced to suppress who they are in the name of religion is not the same as being delivered from homosexuality. Being gay is not something that someone can be delivered from. This is one of the few times where I don't mind invalidating another queer person's journey, because the idea of deliverance has done so much harm to our community. People are being made to believe that a part of them that they can't change and that doesn't hurt anyone is wicked and should be erased. That a deity that is supposed to love them has only given them two options: live inauthentically or burn in hell. That is so unfathomably cruel. And while I empathize with anybody who has been indoctrinated with that bullshit, I will never respect their decision to promote it to other gay people. And what's ironic to me is that there is no other scenario in which society would celebrate somebody who knows that they're gay, who knows that they have same-sex attraction, and still chooses to marry the opposite sex and call themselves straight. But apparently, if you sprinkle the Bible on top, it's suddenly okay to be down low. Thanks for bringing this up, friend. Let's talk about conversion therapy. Quotations around the word therapy because that's a cover name for indoctrination and abuse. Conversion therapy is a list of practices that are implemented with the goal of changing somebody's sexuality or gender identity so that they become straight or cisgender. Methods for conversion therapy range all the way from shaming, coaching, coercion, all the way to exorcisms. What shouldn't be surprising to anyone is that 81% of conversion programs are led by religious organizations. Nearly every public health organization has condemned conversion therapy and the idea of changing someone's orientation. And I just want y'all to guess how much they estimate that taxpayers spend on conversion therapy annually.
You're wrong unless you said $9 billion. As an agnostic lesbian that pays taxes, I'm contributing to the torture of queer people. Woo, America! So to all the people telling me that it's not about shame, it's about abandoning the flesh to live for Jesus. I grew up in the church. I understand the idea behind the ex-gay movement. It's just dangerous and absurd.
I am never asking for a man's help at the store ever again. I went to Target to go get Ali Hazelwood's new book, Not in Love, because it came out today, right? But because it came out today, it wasn't on the shelves, so I don't take a no for an answer. I went up to a certain employee and I said, hey, anybody work in the book section who can like get this from the back for me? It says it's out today. He goes and gets his friend. His friend was cool. His friend was like, I know the book, we'll go get it from the back for you, yada, yada, yada. After he gives me my book, the original guy is like, do you read a lot of hopeless romantic books? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, modern romance is dead. It's a hoax. Okay. Help me, sir. Help me. What am I supposed to do with that? And as I'm walking away because I'm uncomfortable, all I hear is his friend, the one who actually got the book for me, be like, man, I don't know. You just gotta find the right one. And women buy romance books in peace? Please? Anyway, this is out today. Super excited. Now, Emma and Justin, they're unlucky, okay? Some would say cursed, because when both of them date somebody and then break up, that person ends up finding the one right after they break up. They figure, hey, we're gonna date each other. Maybe we're gonna cancel this whole curse thing out, you know? But they end up getting in too deep. You know, it's not a game anymore. This is book 3 in an interconnected standalone series that is a tongue twister every time I have to say it. You could really tell these two characters needed each other because they're polar opposites when it comes to expressing their emotions. I think that really helped with like the movement of the story because they're just kind of bouncing off of each other. Justin and Emma were such a realistic representation of what a relationship in your 20s when you have trauma can look like. If you don't like slow burn, don't pick up this woman's books. Don't. But if you do, I want you gnawing at the cover pages. Do you need to read the first 2 books to read the third? No, but do you want to have a good time? A lot of characters from the first 2 books make some serious appearances in this third one. Gave this 4.5 stars. Writing, the pacing, just like the scenes that were in this just had me, I was damn near barking. As it says, summer on the front, baby. This is just for the summer. This is the perfect way to kick off your romance book era for the summertime. If you like The Summer I Turned Pretty, but you kind of wish that you had something that read a little bit older, had the same vibes, but just like for more of an adult audience, you need to get into Carly Fortune's books immediately. Recently read This Summer Will Be Different by her, and I'm currently, hello, my hair just attacked me. Anyway, I'm partway through Every Summer After, and these books just give me such like away on vacation, you find the one like where you least expect it kind of vibes. And they're just perfect for the summer. I mean, literally summer's in the title. Come on. Nearest beach is 2 hours away from me, but these books make me want to hop in the car and make something shake. Every time Ali Hazelwood is pushing the goalpost, baby, you hoes could never. You could never. I'm reading Not in Love right now. Listen, I knew I was gonna eat it up, and I am eating it up, so what? She wrote this in both of their POVs, but there's a twist. Rue, the FMC's point of view, written in first person. Eli, the MMC's point of view, written in third. Now, I'm not smart enough to understand what we're doing here with that, you know what I mean? But I know that there's something intellectual happening. It really reminds me of Bride, where the whole thing was written in Misery's point of view, but then we got these little snippets at the beginning of each chapter where we got Lo's point of view. Listen, it's giving genius. It's giving, yeah. These are 5 book recommendations for the folks that are trying to get back into reading. Trying to include different genres so that this could be everybody's cup of tea. Okay. For my contemporary fiction folks, Yellowface by R.F. Kuang was genuinely one of the most chaotic, horrific books I think I've ever read. Now, June, technically her title is author, but for me, her title is unhinged, crazy bitch. She steals an unreleased novel from her late friend Athena and tries to pass it off as her own. And this book follows her doing the most insane things to convince people that it was her who wrote this book. This book is for the folks that need something fast-paced. It was haunting, daunting, and taunting. For my nonfiction folk, we have The Anthropocene seen reviewed by John Green. This book is a compilation of essays that focus on little tiny things that have happened in John's life. Through these essays, he's making some pretty profound realizations about the human experience. He just has a way of making the personal feel very universal. For my fantasy folk, I have Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. If you've been following me for a while, you know I don't shut up about this book, okay? This is an Arthurian retelling. I hope I pronounced that right. God help me. Amen. And it follows a 16-year-old Bree who's at an early college program at UNC Chapel Hill. One night she's at a party and she has a run-in with some dark magic, and because she's a curious young girl, she has to find out what the heck is going on. And that leads her to a group on campus called the Legendborn, and she realizes she may have more of a connection with them than she thought. The way that this book combines fantastical elements with reckoning with America's very dark history is just chef's kiss, I'm telling you. Next, we have A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. This is a perfect dark academia YA fantasy. This book follows my girl Effie, okay? And she's not having a good time in her first term at this prestigious architectural college. Only thing keeping her afloat through these troubling times is a book by her favorite author that wrote about the Fairy King. Now, she's been having visions about the Fairy King since she was a very young girl, and everybody thinks she's like crazy. But one day, randomly, the family of this author is holding a competition for somebody to come redesign his late estate. She's jumping on it, okay? She gets there and realizes there's somebody already there who's trying to wreak havoc on her mission. She's not having that at all. The reason I recommend this as a good first fantasy is because the fantastical elements are not hard to follow. You won't get lost in the sauce. Finally, for the romance folks. Now, you know how I feel about this book. Beach Read by Emily Henry is literally up there with my favorite romance books I've ever read, if not my favorite I think I've ever read. This book follows January Andrews. She's a best-selling romance author, and for the next 3 months, she's gonna be spending her time working through her writer's block at her late father's beach house. But oh no! Her nemesis from college lives next door, and he's a literary fiction author. Then they strike up a deal, and they're like, actually, let's try and write each other's style of book to get out of our writer's block. And they go on adventures to try and get in each other's headspace, and it's just, guys, I can't recommend this book more. It changed me. It really did. I love all of these books, and hopefully you will too.
My brother only reads nonfiction books, for the most part, right? So you can imagine my shock when he came to me one day and he was like, I'm trying to get into Emily Henry. I said, now, are you pranking me? He said he doesn't discriminate. He wants to try. He knows I love her books. He wants to give it a go. I said, okay. Knowing that he has the attention span of an ant, no offense, love you, King. I told him to read Funny Story because I thought that was the best Emily Henry book for somebody with a short attention span because it's messy and it's messy real quick. Then today he calls me, we're on the phone, and he goes, Eden, what's going on? I'm 15% of the way into Funny Story. Why are they not meeting at the beach? Why are they living together? And I was like, what do you mean, why are they not meeting at the beach? What the hell are you talking about? He was like, I've been waiting for them to meet at the beach, and they're roommates? I said, King, that's Beach Read. You got the wrong book.
A lot of people ask me, Eden, why is Emily Henry your favorite romance author? What is it about her that just makes it for you? And all I know to tell people is that Emily Henry writes real people with real problems, and they don't always get it right. Sometimes in romance books, the man is so perfect, or the relationship is so perfect, that you almost get taken out of it because you're like, there's just no way. It feels like you're reading fantasy. But with Emily Henry's books, they don't just have that typical third act breakup where everything's perfect and then all of a sudden they have some random fight and you're like, where the hell did that come from? They have genuine problems throughout the book where you're like, I actually have been in a relationship before and I can imagine why these would be actual conflicts. And they happen once or twice or even 3 times throughout the book, and it makes it feel so raw and real. And sure, it's romance, so sometimes they have that perfect little monologue where they're like, I've been in love with you since the moment I saw you, or whatever, right? But what makes her love stories perfect is the imperfections. Feels like if you took a telescope and looked into somebody's window in their house, you could see them having these real conflicts.
Someone had to cut her hair again. And I know it might not seem like the most pressing thing, but it's something that has really sat with me. Over the last 9 months, I feel like we've gotten a chance to learn a little bit about Bisan as a person and not just a journalist. We got to learn how much she loves her home and photography and storytelling, that she loves the beach and loves a little sweet treat and loves her hair. And when we talk about the impacts of a genoslide, we often talk about it big picture because the big picture is so urgent and so pressing. We talk about the loss of life, the loss of your homes and communities and family members and limbs and all of the horrific things happening all of the time. For example, we could talk about Bisan's foot infection and how difficult that makes it for her to be able to move from one place to the other as they're constantly having people evacuate from places just so they can attack them later. But the impacts of a genoslide are all encompassing, and we don't talk about the little things that actually aren't all that little, like the loss of identity and the loss of the little quote unquote things that you love. Bisan loves her hair the way that many girls I know love their hair, the way that I love my hair because it's a part of me and a way for me to express myself. And that has been taken away from her not once, but twice while we sat by and watched. She has had to give up piece and piece and piece of herself, parts of herself that she loves, just to be able to survive and because she can't take care of it anymore. And she's had to do that not once, but twice. And I think about all the Palestinians, especially all of the Palestinians who love their hair, who have had to make the same choice. Bisan has had to cut her beautiful curls for a second time. And the picture of her holding her hair in her hand is going to sit with me for a really long time. It's kind of wild that a place that was already occupying like a whole different country saw that that country's population was like disproportionately children, like almost 50% children, and decided to launch a 9-month attack against those children. And not just an attack, I'm talking brutalization. Like 16,000 have lost their lives, 20,000 have been orphaned, 10 children a day are losing limbs without anesthesia. 90% of the population of these kids are going to have long-lasting like growth impacts from the famine. Every single one has PTSD. I mean, insanity. But that's not the wild part, because that's just like really sad and devastating and horrific. The wild part is that the rest of the world just watched, just sits by and watches it happen and go, wow, that really sucks. And then every so often in the background somebody goes, but what about the children, to justify like giving personhood to a frozen embryo. But otherwise they just sit and watch, let it happen, even cheer sometimes. I had a panic attack today after I got my car seat installed in my car. I was driving home and I looked in my rear view and saw the handle of this car seat and I flipped. I was hit with two things at once. One was the overwhelming amount of love that I felt in my body for this person I haven't met yet. And two, and more pressingly, was this overwhelming sense of responsibility that I had on my shoulders that I've never had before. And obviously, logically, this was responsibility I've known all along. I knew it. I signed up for it. I've been getting ready for months. I'm so excited. And yet in that moment, I was just smacked upside the head with this overwhelming feeling of what have I done? After I calmed down a little while and remembered that these are perfectly normal and rational emotions to feel fear and panic, even if it's something that you really, really wanted, it really hit me. No one should be forced to take this on. No one should be forced to have kids if they do not want them or do not think that they are ready. Kids aren't consequences or punishments. They're people that you are responsible for. And we knew this, right? I knew that. You knew that. We all know that. But it hit me today after I finished freaking out in my car, panicking over a decision that I happily made and would make 1,000,000 times over. That if I am feeling fear and panic and the weight of it all on my shoulders, what does that look like for somebody who does not want that responsibility or cannot handle that responsibility for whatever reason? And what does that mean for that child's life going forward? I will do whatever it takes to make sure my baby feels happy and safe and loved, no matter what that looks like for my life, because that's what I want for my life. And I'm good with that. But I can't imagine the impact that has on the lives of everyone involved if that is not something that they want. Burn them handmaids outfits. Take them off. Stop wearing them every single time you feel like you want to prove some type of radical point. Throwing them away is not good enough. Burn them. Because the oppression that you are continuously cosplaying, that you're continuously acting as if is far off in the distant future, is very much present, active, and ongoing, and has been for centuries against the Black and brown people we continuously leave out of the dialogue. And you know who I'm talking to, because you don't ever see Black and brown people wearing those. Because y'all, and you know who I'm talking about, like to act like the things in The Handmaid's Tale are events coming down the pipeline and not real events and real things that have happened and are continuing to happen to real people. Like, I recently learned about a Mississippi appendectomy, which is back in the 50s and 60s when they would perform hysterectomies on poor black women without their knowledge or consent. And it was so frequent, it got its own nickname. Forced sterilization is a thing. Like, we in the United States right now might be talking about reproductive care and having access to, like, the right to delete a fetus or, like, birth control. But 40% of the women in the world didn't have access to that in the first place. Congo is currently the grape capital of the world, and yet many of those women don't have access to medical care afterwards, whether it be for any diseases or for any pregnancies. Women in Palestine are experiencing miscarriages in astronomically high rates, and if they do get to carry their baby to term, they then can't feed them because they do not make enough breast milk to feed their children because of the forced starvation. Even in the United States, access to antenatal care is absolutely abysmal for many Black, brown, indigenous, disabled, low-income women across the country. These things are happening, and they've been happening, just not to you. So stop cosplaying oppression to make a point that has already been made by the voices you've been ignoring for years, and burn those outfits. There isn't a right way to protest, but there are wrong ways. And I know y'all hate to hear that you're wrong, especially when you're trying to do some good or make some point, but there are wrong ways to protest. Because taking a stand, getting your voice heard, organizing, all of that is good, and there's no singular right way to do it. There are a myriad of different options. But when you're hurting people, especially marginalized communities, especially the people that are the most impacted by marginalization, whether it's by like constantly co-opting movements or by cosplaying oppression that is very much ongoing and active in the real world, you're doing it wrong. Because you're not actually working towards like the benefit of the group or even your main cause. Because if the liberation that you're looking for or the point that you're trying to make comes at the cost of other people, then it's not really liberation. You're not really making your point. You're stepping on other people to benefit yourself. And I've been seeing it a lot lately, from like the block list all the way up to dressing up like handmaids again. Y'all have the right intentions, sure, but the execution is wrong and it's doing more harm than good. And at the end of the day, when it comes to like collective good and moving forward, it is genuinely impact over intent. So I know nobody wants to hear it. I know it's not fun. Yes, there are other avenues to get your voice heard and you should use them. It's okay to have to go back to the drawing board and regroup, but like, hear that feedback and adapt accordingly. It's okay. It's a learning experience. So in light of recent events involving that pew-pew at that event with that now presidential candidate, a lot of people are like, oh, the election is over. It's already decided he's going to win. We should start planning accordingly, blah, blah, blah. And I hear you, but hear me. This is not the time to not vote. If there was ever a time for you to go out there and vote, it's this one. Because I get that the presidential election is a thing that always captures everybody's eyes every 4 years. It's like the Olympics. It's bright, it's flashy, it's loud, it's what we think about. But the thing that actually impacts your life, and if you keep up with the news and with media, the thing impacting your life most directly is always your state and local elections. And if you think about who really facilitates change on a federal level, it's not the president all that often. It takes the House and the Senate too. And this cycle, there are 468 seats up for grabs in Congress this cycle. All of the House seats and 33 Senate seats. This does not include all of the people who impact you and the laws and regulations that surround you directly. So I know a lot of people feel like our fates have already been decided and they'd rather make conspiracy theories and memes or whatever, and that's cool, just don't let your FBI agent catch you. But don't sit this election cycle out, because one thing we've seen historically and in a modern text is that the president might have a lot of power, but there's actually very little that he can do alone. With the Supreme Court looking the way that it's looking, we need everything we can on our side. I'm almost 39 weeks pregnant, which means I am neck deep in the baby waiting game. Could come tomorrow, could come next week, could, worst case scenario, be a couple of weeks. While I'm sitting here thinking about how excited I am to meet my baby, how horrified I am of labor, how thrilled I am to be able to eat sushi again, and while everything else is kind of going on in the world right now, I also want us to think about all of the women who are currently struggling. While we're thinking about elections and online arguments and first meals, all of which are completely valid situations there for the pregnant people, are getting worse and worse by the day. At this point, people are losing their lives because they don't have access to prenatal care. Either it is too unsafe to get any, as in they might be bombed or shot at or any number of things on the way there, or because there aren't enough doctors. Some people are self-inducing so they don't risk going into labor when they are inevitably told to relocate again to a safer place, as if that safer place exists. Over 50,000 babies have been born in the last about 282 days. And if you have any questions about what the conditions look like, remember back in February, I was telling y'all that people were making menstrual pads out of tent scraps. Conditions are cramped, clean water is scarce, disease is running rampant, and at this point the famine is moving from the north to the south, which means more and more people don't have access to food. And if people don't have access to food, babies don't have access to formula, and moms can't make breast milk. I know we all have 10,000 things going on right now, both personal and non-personal, but I'm begging you all, do not forget what is happening in.
I actually don't think Emily Henry cares if I live or die, because why did she just announce that not only are we getting a Funny Story adaptation, but she's writing the script? Like what, a week and a half after the Happy Place adaptation announcement? Are you good, sis? Like, do you sleep? All I can think about is my man Miles. Who's gonna play him? And what are we doing here? Florence Pugh, Andrew Garfield, romantic comedy / drama. All of those things together honestly sound like a blessing and a curse, because I know I won't be the same after this film comes out. We Live in Time, directed by John Crowley, is a film that follows Almut, an up-and-coming chef, and Tobias, a recent divorcee, on the journey of their relationship over the course of a decade after they have a very fated encounter. She hit him with her car. The trailer came out today, and just based off of that, I'm trying to understand where the comedy part comes in, because why was I already crying? This is an A24 film, and y'all know what those tend to do. Make you sob, question your life choices, delve into an existential crisis slowly and painfully. This will have a limited theatrical release starting on October 11th of this year. I am personally going to be sad. However, I will be sad alone, as to minimize my embarrassment, because I know I'm going to be an emotional mess. Let me know if y'all are looking forward to this film, if you're excited for it. Excited may be the wrong word, maybe fearful.
Hey, Book Talk, come here. We need to have a conversation, because I feel like I'm going insane. Let's hash this out now so we can move on. If somebody recommends a book to you and you are curious on what the title of that book is because it's not clear to you, there are two things you can check first: the caption and the text on the screen. Why am I seeing people recommending books and they put the title right here? They put it right here, and y'all are still in the comments talking about some book title? One of the things that's just like, it angers me so badly is when I'm reading a book and the author is trying to let us know how tall the male main character is, but instead of like comparing him to, like, I don't know, like a door or something else large that he's standing next to, you have him tell us how tall he is by correcting somebody who says that he's shorter than he actually is. For example, someone will be like, oh my god, he's 6'2", and he's like, actually I'm 6'4". I don't like you. You give me the same energy as like men who post thirst traps on TikTok because they know they're attractive. Like that does not do it for me. But also, please, for the love of God, don't make it so that the woman is like 4'8", and the only way we know he's tall is by her being like, I'm so small and he's so large. Like, don't do that either. Just like compare him to something he's standing next to, or like, please, like, find a way, but it's not like that. You take one book recommendation from me, let it be this, let it be this. I went into this book expecting it to be a contemporary romance. Why don't we change that to contemporary life ruiner, okay? Just Last Night by Vari McFarlane follows Eve and her 3 close friends who have known each other since they were teenagers, and now they're in their early 30s. Then one night, the unthinkable happens. Like, the worst, most horrendous, most horrific thing that you think could possibly happen happens to them. It causes a lot of strife, drama, secrets start to come out of the woodwork. Here with Eve as she's trying to work through this really trying period of her life. There definitely is romance in this book, but I would describe it more as women's fiction with a subplot of romance. Romance is very beautiful. It's very cute. It's like discovering that someone you didn't know was actually there the whole time. One of my favorite things about this book was how conflict was dealt with between 2 characters that were brawling. It was just equal parts brutal and beautiful. It felt extremely realistic, and it really just hit you in the soul. I don't know, man, if you want a book that's gonna make you sob, pick this one up.